I'm just want to make sure all the panelists are going to have their mic and camera working. I'm just making sure Ioana's online. She's online, but Ioana, if you can hear me, can you just turn your camera on? Okay. 1 second. Can we just have the IT team turn on Zoom user? I think that's Ioana.
It's working. Thank you.
Okay, good. And do we have Abraham as well?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So, welcome everyone to today's webinar on improving and measuring the effectiveness of L&D with AI. My name is Edward Malecki. I will be moderating today's discussion, and we're joined by a panel of L&D and business leaders to explore how organizations are approaching learning outcomes and training effectiveness, basically looking at why they matter, what the challenges in measuring them are, and how AI can help potentially overcome those challenges to drive better business results. So here's what we have planned for today's session. I will start with a brief presentation to just frame the discussion. Next, we'll dive into the panel discussion with the speakers, followed by a live tech demo of how AI tools like Assessify can be applied in practice. And then if time permits, we will open the floor to the audience to ask questions. And then finally, we'll do a wrap up with closing reflections from the panelists. So I want to start with just putting out the big challenge in L&D today. And that is that there's over $350 billion being invested on corporate training in L&D globally, and that number is growing. Yet, despite this massive investment, fundamental issues around measuring impact and ROI still persist. So when we look at a 2020 Brandon Hall study, it found that only 16% of organizations measured real outcomes like behavior change and performance impact. Now, you fast forward to today, an analysis of over 6,000 learning programs found that 92% of them failed to connect the cost to results. So ROI remains very unclear for most of these companies. And many of them are still relying on surface level metrics like attendance or completion rates, satisfaction surveys. And the reason for that is because it's very hard to link behavior change to business impact and then to the results. And there's a growing pressure to prove ROI. So the bottom line is that it hasn't been solved, this issue. In fact, it's becoming more urgent. So you've probably heard this phrase. It's very popular. What gets measured gets managed. It's often attributed to Peter Drucker, one of the most influential voices in modern management. And the idea behind this is that measurement drives improvement. So, basically, the principle it's a principle that's foundational in business, and it applies to the same to L&D. So if we can't measure something, how can we improve it? So that brings up the big question: how do we actually measure and improve the effectiveness of learning in L&D? So we have models like the Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation. We've had this for decades. So we understand how to measure the effectiveness of L&D in theory, but this is actually very hard to implement. Most organizations stop at levels 1 and 2, satisfaction surveys, knowledge checks, and rarely make it to levels 3 and 4, like behavior change, business results. And I do want to be very honest here that measuring ROI in L&D is actually extremely complex. It's not an easy thing to measure because there are a lot of moving parts. So we're not here to say that AI magically solves the entire equation. But here's the key point. If we're not capturing actual learning outcomes, then we don't have anything to really link to behavior change and to the results. So we don't have a shot at actually measuring the real impact unless we are capturing the learning outcomes. So once we capture the outcomes, we can then link these. And then from there, we can come up with approximations of ROI, or at least very strong proxy indicators. So AI is changing things at this point. So AI not only enables personalized feedback to the learner and to the trainer about the learner, but can also measure learning outcomes and generate data-driven insights that can link learning to on-the-job performance. And now when you have this intelligence built into an enterprise system, this then makes this whole process and frameworks like the Kirkpatrick model scalable, actionable, and operational. So later on in a demo, we will show you how Assessify brings this to life. So what we're going to discuss in today's panel, we're going to look at learning outcomes and training effectiveness. What are they? Why they matter? The challenges in measuring them. And then we're going to discuss the role of AI in potentially overcoming these challenges and improving L&D results. With that said, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. We have a diverse group of leaders who each bring valuable insights into this discussion. Starting from the top left, we have Abraham Villalobos. He is L&D expert who's worked across industries like banking, medical, automotive, tourism, logistics, and supply chain. We have Sean Conley, who is the global head of L&D at Aero Alliance. Prior to that, NBC Universal, Baker Hughes, GE, and has a lot of years experience in this field. Next, we have Joanna Land, CFO for Fortune 500 and for PE portfolio companies. We have Ovid Kadran, the Director of Learning at Mohegan. And finally, we have Bhupesh Taharia, who is the CEO of Aegis School of Data Sciences and AI, and also my business partner and founder of Assessify. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to the attendees. So let me stop sharing my screen here. Okay, so when we look at learning outcomes, we often talk about the importance of learning outcomes. But they're not always well understood or consistently applied. So I want to start with you, Ovid. What are learning outcomes, and why are they so important in L&D and training?
Yeah, so for me, learning outcomes are really where we need to be, right? And so the outcomes generally are focused around behavior changes, generally focused around getting people to think a different way or work a different way or do something differently. And so without the outcomes and without starting with that, what we need the training to kind of really move the needle on, you're essentially wasting money. And so you need to start with what you want the outcome to be, and then backtrack into a solution on how you're going to get us there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Same question to you, Abraham. If you can just give us a little sense in your perspective, what learning outcomes are and why they're important.
As a bit mentioned, the most simple way to define this is like two main ways. The first one is behavior. You expect someone that after a training, there is a new behavior, a change in the behavior. And the other part, it's a product. Before the training, you don't know how to do something. And after the training, you know how to do it, but not only how to do it because you now do it, but because you follow some certain steps or you are compliant with some standards. That in that way you can say, hey, after the training, these people learn to do or change their behavior. That will be the simplest way to think about the outcome of a training. Now, that's deeper than that, right? Because there is a lot of things involved in that. First of all, defining the behavior. Okay, you want a person, you want your employee to think in a certain way, as Abid mentioned, or to behave in a certain way in certain scenario. Okay, let's define what that behavior must look like and which are that micro behavior that people should understand and align the way they think so they can behave as expected. And on the other hand, when we talk about a product or following a process, of course, you have to have defined the process. This is the most common issue in L&D. Sometimes we expect to train prior to the process is defined. And the other part is, okay, you have a product, which standards or requirement, this product must be compliant. Timing, size, following this process, compliance. So yeah, behavior and product is the expected output, but it's deeper and must consider a lot of definition behind that.
Yeah, no, that's very thorough, and I appreciate that. Sean, over to you. I want to get your thoughts on the same subject. What are, how you define learning outcomes, why they're important in your line of work, across the various companies you've worked at.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for the invitation to be here. I love these kind of conversations. I kind of reflect back on everything that's been said, and I think of the L&D journey, right? I think we've spent decades in learning and development, measuring butts and seats and smile sheets, and then we wonder why we're still questioning the effectiveness, right, of a learning outcome. And to me, that learning effectiveness, as you've heard already, it has to move us from being a reporting function to that behavior change that we've heard, right? And to me, that one missing word, though, is it's behavior change that drives business results, right? We have to be able to be in tune with what does the business need and how do we help that behavior get us there. And I think a lot of times, just in my world of being in L&D for some time, there's a disconnect often between the learning function and the business needs. Because for years and years and years, it's like, well, here's the menu of the stuff that we teach. This is what we do. But you're not measuring the effectiveness because you're not delivering what the business needs. And so as long as those behavior change are tied to and drive a business result, I think that's what we're after. And that takes a shift, though, in how a lot of us think in L&D, right? Which is we have to be business people first and L&D people second. And that's just kind of my thought process there. But it's exciting because to me, there's so much we can do being more effective by using some of the tools that we're here to talk about.
Yeah. So I just want to follow up with I'm genuinely curious, when we look at the Kirkpatrick framework, we have level 2, right, of learning. What is the learner actually learning? In L&D, are the L&D leaders zooming in on that part and really taking almost the academic approach and applying a framework like Bloom's taxonomy to really see okay, we ask them this question, we assess them in this particular area of product knowledge or sales negotiation or whatnot, and we gave them, let's say, a case scenario that tests their ability for critical thinking. Are L&D leaders zooming in on that aspect to really actually differentiate between the learning effectiveness and the learning outcomes and measure the learning outcomes? Is that something that is talked about, at least in theory? Ovid or Sean or whoever wants to kind of chime in. I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
Yeah, and as you work up through the levels of Kirkpatrick, it's very easy to assess, the knowledge and the comprehension pieces of it, right? And so I think that's where we tend as an L&D function to really stick. And as Sean very nicely put it, with the smile sheets, the butts and seats as kind of, getting and assessing kind of those outcomes. But It's much harder when you get to that application level. And that's really, as an L&D professional, where you see the change in behavior and where you see the impact, as Sean said, on the business results. It is infinitely harder going from those first two levels to that third to get that transition and to make that leap into there. And I think that's why, as we said, for many, many years, that's where we're stuck. We're stuck at those first two levels because it's easy. You can absolutely quantify those pieces of it. It's jumping to that third level that is the most difficult.
Yeah.
Love what you just said, because I think that we are stuck in many ways, or a lot of, it's hard to lump everybody into one category, but a lot of learning people are stuck because you're like, but I did my job. My job was to give you the information. Thank you so much. And exactly, like you just check that box. But it's until you put that business hat on and you say, first of all, did I really, how, if you can't see it, it didn't happen. Like if I can't see the behavior change, if I don't talk to my customer, if I don't talk to my partners or whatever it is, or the teams, to see has that behavior actually taken effect there. And then we are creatures of habit too, right? So you give all the best information you want, and it's really exciting for the first 25 minutes after you leave a learning class or something like that, and you're like, oh, this is great, I'm going to change everything. And then you go to your emails and you're right back into old patterns and old behaviors. And so that it's that constant, it reminds me of that saying, it takes a village, right? L&D is just one component of what we're trying to do in the employee life cycle. But we have to partner differently. We have to work differently, and we have to think differently to say, how do we do this as a tribe, as a team? It's your manager has to be involved, the supervisor, the customers. If we're all involved in this, we then start to end up with a better product, which is that behavior we've been looking for.
Yeah, that's very, very good point. Bhupesh, I want to hear from your perspective, especially as a leader in coming from an education background for 30 years. How do you think about defining learning outcomes? And then why is it so important to get them right?
So learning outcome is a very broader term. It's not only used in corporate, anywhere, wherever the learning is happening. So let's understand from the practical point of view. You're a startup company, or let's example, you're a large company like Accenture, and you are likely to get a project of maybe $5 million on Gen AI, and your employees are not skilled on the Gen AI or agentic AI, right? So you want to conduct the training. Why? Because you want to execute that project and build up a new business line. So you have trained guys, 100 guys or 1,000 guys on the Gen AI, and you conducted the training over 3 months or maybe a month. But after that, you would like to really check whether they have actually acquired the knowledge. One, whether they have acquired the skill, which is their ability to apply that knowledge and build the Gen AI product, right? So these are the two fundamental things. And of course, attitude is not important because you have already checked the attitude in them, right? They're not the fresh guys, right? And that's what you want to really measure. Most of the organizations are failing in terms of really measuring the learning outcome itself, right? And fundamentally, why? Because they're using absolutely like a age-old tool, which is multiple choice question. I can really use very harsh word like these are the stupid tools, right? You can't really check the applied skills. You can just check the memory. And I think ChatGPT is pretty good in terms of the knowledge. You don't require to do the multiple choice questions. You have to actually check the code. Let's example, their ability to write the code. Let's example in sales. You have to really see whether they can really negotiate. Do they have the product knowledge? Can they really talk to the customer? Handle the objections, and that kind of stuff you can't really measure with the multiple choice questions. You have to really go deeper with case scenario basis stuff, or oral simulation kind of stuff, which is extremely hard to do because corporate do not run like a universities, right? They don't have the multiple professors or trainers who are manually evaluating, and that's a big piece, right? And I think Corporates across the world, they're failing. They're just doing it for formality as a formality. Check the pre-training knowledge, which is on the multiple choice question. After the training, check the knowledge, right, which is again multiple choice question. So I've seen both the sides from the corporate and as institution. As institution like AGC School of Data Science and AI, we have run hundreds and thousands of corporate training, and that's where most of the corporate come to us because our major emphasis on the outcome, right? So we say, okay, grab the multiple choice question. If you're running the training on the machine learning or Python or those kind of area, we'll go and do the deeper level of assessment, right? And that's where I think everybody is failing. And if you try to really measure the learning effectiveness without measuring the learning outcome, this is like a causal correlation. You can't really establish the cause and effect, right? And that's very fundamental and very basic thing, very basic principle. But I think we are failing, and one of the major reason is we use legacy learning management systems, which are multiple choice question based, whether it is Coursera or everywhere. The primary tool is multiple choice question. So that's my 0 cent on learning outcome.
Yeah. So learning outcomes really define what a learner should be able to do after
Yes.
they complete the training program. So because we often get mixed up between learning outcomes and learning effectiveness, or we could say training effectiveness and learning outcomes. Learning outcomes is more from a academic viewpoint of actually at what level cognitively they understand, can apply, can critical think about these things they just learned, whereas the effectiveness is then linking it to the behavior change and to the results. Is that correct?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, so even if you don't measure the learning outcome properly, it will be absolutely difficult to measure the application and implementation, or maybe even checking the behavior level. Because what you do, you throw the survey questions to your supervisors or to your employees, and you ask them, okay, give me the feedback. Are they able to really negotiate well on the ground? Do they have the product knowledge? These are like a absolutely useless surveys because there is a lot of personal bias you bring, right? I'm sorry for not being politically correct, but as a teacher, I tell the hard truth, right? So, and that's where so everything. So you spoke about Kirkpatrick model or Philip model. The first layer, which is again survey. The second, which is the most important layer, which is learning outcome, we are not measuring properly. And the third layer, we are trying to really jump on the behavioral change without actually checking whether they have learned the machine learning or not. If they have not learned the Gen AI, they can't really build the product. It's straightforward. It's a very simple, right? Because you have not learned during you have done degree, you have 20 years experience, right? And then trying to really check effectiveness or impact or is all useless activity if you really don't build the foundation, right? You're trying to build the castle without the foundation.
Yeah. Abraham, I'd love to hear from you in your experience of, why is this such a how do you define these learning outcomes, right? And then why is it so difficult to measure them effectively? Similar to what Bhupesh is mentioning, kind of zooming in on that level 2 of the Kirkpatrick model. Is that something that you're talking about in your organizations? And then why is it difficult to measure?
Usually, and I will rely on Sean's comment at the beginning of the conversation, it's because the L&D function needs to be really close to the business and understand the business. I think that a great part of being an L&D function, a function of service, is that we need to understand a lot of processes for many different areas and businesses. So regarding your example, Edward, sales training for the sales team, usually, hey, I need a sales training. Perfect. And then the L&D function goes out, buys something or creates something, but never double click on the need. Okay, which part of the pipeline of the sales process is the one that is failing? Is because of the leads is not good enough, so we need to work with the marketing team. It's because the sales team don't have the know-how of the products. They don't know how to run their sale on the system or ERP. They don't know how to close the sale. So when we're talking about training and expected outcomes or learning outcomes, we need to double click on that. So we can specify which behavior our expected output we have. So then we can say, before the training, the marketing team doesn't know, they didn't know how to create a proper lead. And after the training, we increase the turnover of the leads 15% because they now do know how to do it. So the difficult part of this is one, L&D having this approach to the business and truly think about themselves as a service function. And the other part is like most of the time we need to, for performing this double click to the business, we need to take out this information from the subject matter experts. Sometimes they don't want to share information. Sometimes they don't want to show which part of the project of the processes are not good enough, or we are having some kind of leak in the team. So the difficult part is to define that. I truly believe that once you have defined it and have this engagement with the business, having this expected outcome and linking that to behavior and that behavior to a business result, like increasing sales, like increasing the turnover from leads to sales, it's really easier. But again, creating that link is really difficult if you are not engaged with the function, to the business, and if the business doesn't trust you because they don't share their information, right? So that's why you need to be, as Sean mentioned, really close to the business to show the stakeholders that you manage their business, that you understand how the processes work, so you can have these insights and how to create meaningful learning experiences that can be linked to business.
Yeah, and I want to touch more on that when we get into the training effectiveness piece. But you bring up a good point in that, having the learning outcomes is what you need to link to the effectiveness, but getting the insights or being able to understand like what the metrics are to be able to, work with departments to understand what results you need to be able to link to is a challenge also in itself, because you have to work cross-functionally with all these different departments. So that's a really good point. I want to ask Ioana, I'm very excited to get your perspective because, I think as a CFO and business leader, from the boardroom, your perspective is like really valuable in this because it's going to speak to, how the business sees it. So how do you evaluate L&D investment? Is it an asset? Is it a liability? Especially when ROI is hard to quantify directly.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Actually, I want to take this question first and build a little bit on what Abraham said, because I have a clear example that happened in my tenure at L'Oreal, where I was a CFO of a division, and we made an acquisition which doubled the division. So one of the sudden, we were managing at that time gross to net, which means everything that's in between gross sales and net sales. And this is the sales team. It's exactly your example, Abraham. And it was about, when I started, 25 million, we doubled the division, we grew, so it was 100 million. And all this is done, 100 million of cost to the company, on Excel spreadsheets by the sales team. And when you think about it, it's what it is gross to net, because I don't want to speak finance terms. It's everything that you give in coupons, discounts, returns, anything that, will reduce the sales at the end of the day. And this had to be tracked, like, retailer by retailer. I gave Walgreens a discount of 50%. I gave, Amazon buy one, get one free. And the sales team were doing this in Excel, right? So finance was very nervous. I'm like, 100 million, and this is a huge risk to the company. So we came up with a tool to implement with Accenture, speaking of Accenture earlier, Bhupesh, and it made sense. It made total sense from a finance perspective, right? I removed the risk from the business. Now everything is going to be automated and all that. But the sales team didn't see it like that. And I think the L&D team was also very focused on the benefits of the business, but we didn't look at it of what's going on with the sales team. They were like, we don't want to learn a new tool. We don't want to do it. We have our own, they call it checkbook in Excel, and we track everything. Why do we need to adopt this? So we got into this clash at the end of the day about like not wanting to adopt it. And the mistake that we did, it's kind of going back to what Abraham said, understanding not only the business benefits in finance, right? I'm going to be able to have a much better view over the 100 million spent. I'm going to see return on investment at Walgreens, Walmart, wherever we do these big, investments in the gross to net. And I'm also going to be able to look at forecasts, because now I know if I do a BOGO, buy one get one free at Walgreens, is going to generally get me 2 times, the product, let's say. So we looked at it only through this lens, but there's another lens from the sales team saying, and that's when you quantify the L&D, right? What does this get you? Well, it gets you not only out of Excel and manual work, but it gets you into predictive analytics, into AI. It gets you into, being a much more skilled professional, because probably every company tracks it in, using Excel, but we developed with Accenture a very sophisticated tool. So the idea is to, coming back to what you asked me, to measure the effectiveness of learning, not only through one channel like finance in this case, but also to go to not the business impact, but the people impact. Because in this way, the sales team did not understand what's in it for me at the end of the day, right? How is this going to help me, save me time, make it easier, make me a better professional, and so on. So then coming back to your question, sorry, it's a kind of a long answer. I think we need to start thinking also about L&D as not only as an operating center, but also an engine for asset creation. And I like kind of like the examples used earlier with butts in the seats. L&D, when you think of L&D learning, you think of school. And in school, they measure 3 things generally. They measure compliance, they measure attendance, and they measure pass rate. But when you bring that into an environment of a corporation, you cannot, that doesn't translate. It's not enough. So you have to start thinking, impact on the business, impact on the people, and impact on, the culture or any other measure that you want to do. And it's obviously not an easy way to measure it, but I think the more you work together, exactly as Sean said, and Sean, you're hired in the finance team at any time, because you obviously think like a business partner, but kind of switching the hats. Finance thinking of it from how is L&D going to contribute to the growth of the company, which are 3 metrics, right? Growth, protect the margin, and the last metric is mitigate risk. And then the other hat is like, how am I going to invest in people? Because people are the biggest asset of a company. So these L&D programs, need to be very effective for the people as well, not only finance terms.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And what would the financial consequences be of not measuring learning effectively?
Oh, I love this question. So it will be what we are calling sunk cost. And one thing to know is that finance always thinks about opportunity cost. Let me just go one step back, right? So opportunity cost, it means if I take $1 and invest it into something, what is the return on investment? And we always look at it like investing $1 here versus $1 there, and what is the return on investment. So you have to make a decision how you're going to use that $1. So in this case, the opportunity cost is always looked at, but then also if you invest in the wrong assets, or you keep investing in wrong assets or wrong program, what we call it sunk cost, meaning it's cost that you cannot recover, and it's a direct cost to the company. The other thing would be you missed on the performance gains. And I was reading an article where I think Deloitte did the research where they were saying that 1% increase in L&D investment, so let's say in this case $1, results in about 0.2% raise in same year revenue or sales, right? So therefore that $1, you may get about $4.70 in revenue. So again, the importance of really understanding the impact and the effectiveness of your L&D onto the business results. And that's why it's very important to be able to measure it. And going back to the opportunity cost, you have only $1. That $1 better be invested in the right program. And that's why you need tools like Assessify to be able to tell you where is my biggest return on investment, so that I put that $1 towards, the best return on investment.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it's such an important perspective from the CFO, the CEO, because this is ultimately like where we're getting the money for L&D investments, and then who we have to justify these measurements for, these proxy indicators. So I really appreciate that perspective. I want to switch to, so we talked about learning outcomes, and which are really about what the learner should be able to do and apply after just going through the program, right? And then I know we've touched on this, but I want to focus directly on this now, the learning effectiveness, the distinction between level 2 Kirkpatrick learning outcomes. Now we're going up to behavior change, and then the results, the learning effectiveness. So, we often hear about this, but it's not always clear what it means, because with consideration to some L&D people equating effectiveness with completion rates or satisfaction surveys, while others, focus on deeper metrics like behavior change or business impact. So, Ovid, what does learning effectiveness mean to you, and why is it so important in evaluating the training success?
Yeah, absolutely. So learning effectiveness to me means that you have really achieved, the end goal of the learning program. So, at the beginning, we talked about, setting your learning objectives, understanding what your outcomes are. That's kind of really the steel thread that runs through the beginning of the program all the way through to the end. And then most of the time, as you know, when we hit the measurement piece, we're done. We're moving on to the next thing. We've counted the butts and the seats, the smile sheets, and things like that. Moving on to that next level, it really shows the overall business impact. And so looking at, those learning outcomes and then translating that into effectiveness, which is essentially the sustainability, right, of those outcomes, kind of living, beyond the end of the training program, really is essential. And that's what it's all about. I've done training in my life where I knew, either given the audience or what I was asked to deliver, I know the effectiveness is going to be 0, because it's either not the right time or not the right content or not the right behavior change. I've also seen it work in the very opposite direction, where, we did a wonderful job, right, with the content, got everything, but then fall flat when it comes to the effectiveness piece of it, right? Did we really impact that change? And so, when we look at that measurement piece of it, we started really on this journey not too long ago, really truly getting at that effectiveness, because I know the way that our economy has been going in the US for a while now, somebody somewhere is going to ask me for some hard numbers, right? On we gave you $3 million last year. What are we getting for that money? And, essentially we turn to looking at really where are the areas where we can indicate where we've got a significant ability to see if there's been a behavioral change, or is that impacting the bottom line? And so we started looking at 360s, our employee engagement surveys, and then our guest satisfaction scores, right? It kind of hits on all levels across the organization of where we can see that behavior change and look at where there might be a direct impact, whether it be peer-to-peer or direct report, like we have 360, whether, our employees find this to be, a good place to work, right? There's a lot of questions that we can kind of relate back to, the training that we do itself. And then ultimately, in gaming and entertainment, we live and die by that guest service score, right? Happy guests want to come back and they want to spend money. And so that really ultimately is kind of the crescendo when it comes to our business outcomes at the end of the day. And then obviously you look at, guest service would have an impact on our overall revenue, ultimately make that tie in. And so, it's been a journey getting there, but, looking at those sustainable learning, effectiveness, and does it live beyond them leaving the 4 walls of the classroom, is really the end game for L&D.
Yeah, it's so many variables to be able to tie those. Correlation doesn't always mean causation, even if you know that, hey, this is from my training, but like being able to map that and link that out is such an important piece, and it's such a challenge, which is why we're here talking about this. Sean, I want to hear your thoughts on the same thing. Anything you want to add?
I 100% agree with this. A lot of times in companies we confuse learning activity with learning impact, right? It's 2 different things. And from a financial standpoint, from our CFO perspective, I love it, because it's like we can invest, but is it a sunk cost, or are we actually getting a return with that? And I think, as you just heard, L&D is one piece of a bigger puzzle, right? Which is when you start to look at engagement scores, and you start to look at customer feedback, and you start to look at all of that. All of those things come together, and you kind of now start to chart to see how did all of this work in unison. Where I think we get into a little bit of trouble is all of those things are done by other people. It's like we don't always bring the voices together and sit at the same table. It's like, oh, we're running this survey, but what are we doing with that data? Or here's your budget, but we didn't even talk about what we need. And so I think it's that whole piece of, when you want to get to that next level, we also have to realize that you have to have an infrastructure set up in your organization to allow for that, because we can have all of those, the surveys, the money, everything there. But I think all of us know that just because you've learned something doesn't mean you're going to do it. And so that's where that measurement is coming up to play now. It's like, I don't know, like I'm frustrated quite a bit going, we've said this a million times, this is how, but there's still a reason we're not doing it. And so that's when learning, I think, from the classroom to reality is we oftentimes educate an employee, but we don't educate a supervisor on how to hold someone accountable. We don't educate, your peers on this is how we perform here, or this is what we do. It's that transactional piece. It's like you did this thing, but there's so much more now that has to come into play to get to real effectiveness. And so until we start to talk about this at a broader level, we will always just be going same people, same class over and over and over again. But there's a reason why we're not doing it. And so sometimes you have to ask the learner, like, well, tell me what's going on here. And that's where I think we use different tools to help us become better coaches or whatever it might be. But the inherent issue, I think, in a lot of companies is that we're all so busy. And so we don't take time to talk about what we've learned and how we're going to apply it. We just put you right back into we throw you off the deep end and say, there you go, you have the information, you better use it. And that's just not how humans operate, right? We're building behaviors and we're changing things. And I mean, I say this all the time, the easiest thing to do when you come to a learning class of any type is nothing. It requires no effort. And it's probably what 90% of people do. They just go right back into habits. It's, when you read the book, you do all that stuff, but it's a support structure that has to change the culture and change the behavior. But that's everybody. That's finance, that's HR, that's operations, it's marketing, it's sales. We have to do it together. And I just think I would just, echo what's been said. We've got a lot of great data with surveys and 360s and stuff. It tells us everything we need to know, but until we talk about it, we won't see the outcomes that we want.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good points you brought up there. And I think it's clear that L&D also needs more of a strategic seat at the table for these kinds of conversations, because we're talking about the company's greatest assets, company's greatest investments. This is why, there's $352 billion being invested today globally in L&D, and that number is growing year after year. So it's like, we know this is doing something. We know this is important. These are our greatest assets. But then to kind of be treated like this one-off, separate thing and expect the ROI and the tangible, proxy indicators, it's very challenging to do, especially if they're siloed from the strategic, board viewpoint. So, Bhupesh, you work at the intersection of education and technology. So what makes it hard to measure effectiveness, and where do you think we can do better?
I think there are a couple of issues why it makes learning effectiveness measuring difficult. One, I think it's like a L&D professionals. So we conducted a massive research. I have given this research to 21 students from one of the Ivy League in India. And they carried out research in India with over 100 L&D professionals. And the outcome of the result was quite surprising, is that although everybody understands that it is important to measure the learning effectiveness, nobody is doing that. The reason being, it is like a cancer patient on third stage. You declared him dead and nothing can be done. And why? Because you don't have the medicine. You don't have tools to actually measure. You run thousands of training programs, and measuring each training program, learning effectiveness, you have to really collect the data for feedback surveys, for their reaction, their satisfaction. You have to measure the learning outcome, then you have to measure the learning behavioral change, right? And then you have to measure the impact, right? Impact, you have to really see what is the customer satisfaction survey improved, right? What is the revenue improved? Whether the like for example, if you're in production, whether the cost has come down, right? All those kind of stuff you have to really measure. If you're in call center, the time to resolve the ticket has been gone down or not. Collecting this data is extremely difficult. One, putting it and then creating the consolidated score in terms of learning effectiveness is extremely difficult. And then the last thing is, of course, the ROI. So first is basically you don't have the strong technological pillar, right? You don't have the vehicle, right? Wherein you can collect, collate, and this can really do a lot of mathematical operation and can really give you the composite score, right? Give you where you're moving. The second is, of course, the behavioral issue. The third is, of course, L&D professionals, L&D departments are resource constrained, right? Since they're not measuring the learning effectiveness, uh, CFOs like Yana, they think that they're not measuring. And since they are not measuring, they always have the question mark. I have seen a lot of L&D heads lost their job because when the cost cut down, the first thing they do is they cut the head of the L&D and their team, right? Because they have not been actually telling, quantifying it. Everybody understand that without training, nothing will really happen, at least in tech, in sales, right? Training is very important. Putting number is difficult, right? So while most of us, we are studying in business school how to really measure it, practically we are not implementing. So behavior, resource constraint, and the most important is there's no strong technology platform which is available. And the last piece is, of course, which I reiterated earlier, is basically we are not measuring the learning outcome. Right? So if we not measuring the learning outcome, if we, even if you give the weightage factor of say 25% or 20% or 30, right, and you give the maximum weightage on which is like an impact, right, result, like for example 35%, this 20%, 30% which you have given the weightage is actually becoming zero. Right? So then whatever the learning effectiveness or ROI you are measuring, is a causal correlation, not causation, right? So building up the index is extremely difficult.
Hmm.
That's the fundamental problem which I have observed.
Yeah. That's a, I think a interesting point because it's really from the academic perspective of like where we're actually looking at the learning outcomes. Because I know universities are now requiring reporting on, what are the learning outcomes, and that's where we zoom in on that level 2 piece. So from the academic perspective, I think you put a very high emphasis on the learning outcome piece, and rightfully so, because that's what we need to have that granular detail to be able to link to these other things like.
So Eddie, it's not only the academic perspective, even the corporate, let's example, sales, right? Okay, you're in the sales. Iona gave the example also in the sales. So in sales, let's example, we do a lot of brainstorming that the product is not selling. Now, the new product, let's example, even Assessify, right? Okay, if you don't know the product, you will not be able to sell. And then you can really keep on doing the brainstorming why the product is not selling. It's a complicated product. You need to really know in and out. And if you have conducted the training, you need to know whether this guy knows your product or not before you actually start putting him into the market. And that's what the major work which we have done with one of the leading fintech company, where we try to really measure the learning outcome for 800 employees in roughly around 4 languages, right? And these are the guys, those who are out there in the field. They not only speak English, but they speak Hindi, Tamil, and Telugu, 4 different languages. And you don't have access to the computer, right? And measuring learning outcome is extremely difficult. And while we did, surprisingly, we could really find out that there were two gaps. One, uh, the ability to negotiate, and the second piece was the product, right? They were not knowing about the product, right? These are the very smaller thing at a granular level you have to really identify. Right? And that you can do only when you really do well-defined learning outcome measurement. So I don't agree that this is only an academic activity, right? Because learning is learning, whether it is a university or a corporate, doesn't matter, right? If you are investing millions of dollars and you want to really measure the ROI, that okay, if I invested $5 million in training, whether I have done the $100 million sales or not, right? And that is how you will be able to find the ROI. But before you reach to the ROI, you have to really do a lot of other stuff, right? You have to also isolate a lot of factors, whether the sales increase is only just because of the training. And even if you have to do that, you have to really see whether the training is being properly done or not. Otherwise, how you're going to eliminate the other factors or establish the correlation? So it is extremely difficult, but it is not so difficult as people have made out of that, right? I think if we really follow the first principle, if we really build up brick by brick, it becomes much easier in terms of really doing that.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Joanna, how can, to kind of wrap up this section and then we're going to move on to looking at AI. I want to know, how can L&D leaders work more collaboratively with CFOs or finance teams to build a shared roadmap for outcome-driven learning measurement and transformation?
Yeah, and that's actually a great question to kind of go to what Bhupesh said. If you have to build the brick by brick, then you'll have to be able to work together and understand every piece that's moving, right? And finance is pretty good at that, to be honest. You just need the business partners to be part of it, because you can isolate every brick. And you have to be directionally correct most of the time. You don't have to be 100%, because directionally correct 80% will still get you there. So first, I would say we need to speak the same language, which is very important, because if you think of it, finance is speaking ROI, capital allocation, product margin, where L&D speaks growth, engagement, learning journeys, right? So we kind of have to first align on the language and to speak each other's language. And the other thing would be then to translate each other's language into what does this mean for the company, right? So, for example, if someone asks me, I want you to fight for this L&D program, I'll be like, okay, tell me how to do it. I want to do it because, I want to be your business partner, but tell me how to do it and how to fight for it. I mean, somehow you have to translate it for me in margin, you have to translate it for me in growth, into people culture, people development. We didn't talk a lot about this, but it's very important because, again, people are the most important asset of a company. And the last piece that we didn't talk about, but it's top of mind for me because I was the head of audit, is risk mitigation. So if you have the right learning programs in place to protect the assets of the company, because people can make mistakes, and if they are not trained on, how to represent the company well, how to talk about the product, exactly what Bhupesh was saying, how to, convey the message about the product is doing, it can open up to huge risks for the company. So risk mitigation, it's another one that we should try to assess as much as possible when we talked about, the ROI of learning. So just to kind of wrap it up, first would be to speak each other's language. The second would be to work towards a common goal and common roadmap, which generally is the strategic view of the company. And you have to justify, in a way, how does the L&D program, it doesn't have to be one training, but a portfolio of trainings, how does it align to the strategic view of the company long term? And how does it contribute to the bottom line? And lastly, how do you develop people? Because what we do is generally it's called the capability tree for people assessment for people capabilities, and how do you develop people not for the organization of today but for the organization of tomorrow? So you need this ability to really measure the impact of the learning program, not only on today but also in the future. Is your organization really prepared for the future growth with the right systems, tools? And here could be, L&D programs, it could be L&D tools, but also people skills.
Mm. Thank you for that perspective. I want to now kind of go into the AI in L&D. So AI is transforming a lot of things, and including L&D. So it can automate assessments, can give personalized feedback, and it can link learning to the business impact. So, Abraham, I want to start with you. How, and I know we're all new to this, right? We're all discovering it simultaneously. So there is no particular expertise. But how do you foresee AI helping to overcome some of the challenges that we talked about in measuring and improving learning outcomes or learning effectiveness overall?
I truly believe that AI is changing the game in many different ways. It's required to the L&D professionals to add new skills to our own portfolio, to know how to manage AI and what AI can do by itself, but also like new abilities like curating, interpreting content, how to manage the AI goes further than know how to click the interface of any AI systems, right? So it's changing the game in that part, but mainly is required from my perspective that L&D should not be the function pushing for AI to introduce to any organization. AI should be part of the business strategy and part of the IT environment in the organization you are trying to put this piece as a keystone, right? So, of course, as an individual L&D professional, you can use many different tools. You can name whatever you want and use it to improve your workload, using it to perform faster activities. But if we want AI to be a keystone in the strategy of L&D function, it should be embedded in the IT environment so we can protect information about the organization. Of course, it requires to establish policies regarding the way you should use it, what kind of information you can upload and read. Defining it will be an open environment or a closed environment that will provide information only with uh, uh, the documents and policies that organizations creates. So it requires a lot of infrastructure, yeah, but also a lot of culture and policies creation. So it's changing the game not only for L&D, but it's changing the game for everyone, mainly for the IT, for compliance team, and of course, in a second wave for us as the L&D professionals. If many organizations are working on that, I have been organization that they already have embedded some assistants, some agents. If hey, you don't want to talk with HR, talk with your AI assistant. Now you can fully aware of the policies and procedures and can assist in a first tier level. So I think that the future of L&D is related to know how to use AI in the creation and how to curate content for learners. I think that is something that already happened with many platforms that already have content created and can personalize content. Yeah, that's great. That's the first approach to get learners interested in the content. But how we can create learning paths, how we can structure that learning in a way that is truly changing the mindset or behavior of a person, and how we change that into a behavior and again link that to a business result, right? I have been now in processes where you are being interviewed by an AI assistant, which is I was really amazed of that how the AI double link on some part of some experiences of how the AI wrote something like Could you please specify how you did this?
Mm.
I mean, even better than some recruiting teams that I have been part of, So it's really great to use these tools. But again, we need to know how and when to use it. And as any tool, if you want a great outcome, you need to put a great input.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I think that's, you brought up a lot of really good points in there, including like, like it needs to be adopted at the IT level, at the whole institution level as a strategy in their infrastructure, not just a decision of L&D alone. And also, you brought up another important point about guardrails. What are the guardrails for adopting this AI? I think that's just something that it needs to be defined. So, Ovid, I know you are a big proponent of AI and forward thinking with AI. So I'd love to get your experiences, your thoughts, and how you see AI helping to overcome some of those challenges in measuring and improving learning outcomes and effectiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because when we think about just the shifts that AI has brought to L&D in a very short period of time. I mean, 6 months ago, I wasn't even thinking about AI. It wasn't even on my radar, right? And now all of a sudden, it's like it's part of my everyday life the minute I walk in the door. And so thinking about taking development time from 3 months down to maybe 3 or 4 weeks, right? All things being equal, those are kind of some of the obvious pieces of it. But when I think more broadly as well about, the abilities of AI, we sometimes have, tens of thousands of data points, right? From those surveys, whether it's 360s, engagements, and trying to tie it all together. It did in about 7.5 minutes what it would have taken me about 7.5 weeks. And that to me is amazing. Now, obviously, everything is still new, right? And so you still want to go back and kind of tick and tie things and make sure it aligns, make sure that it's giving you accurate data at the end of the day. But just the time savings and the amount of things you get done in the measurement space that would take us months to do before, now is a matter of minutes. And you take some of that time, right, that you get back. And that's when you really go back and you analyze the data and make sure that it's accurate and tick and tie it back. When I think about, 3 months ago, if somebody had said, hey, we're going to add to staff on your team, I would have said, give me an instructional designer tomorrow. Now I can do that on my own if I had to, right? And so now I look at what this shift is going to cause, in the industry and certainly within L&D alone. I want an analyst, right? I want somebody that knows how to use AI. I want somebody that can take the data, put it in, get an output, verify it, validate it, and give me that outcome, right? That's where I see a way, way more, prudent investment in my limited resources from my learning team to be able to use more effectively. And so not only does it transform, kind of the way that we develop and certainly going to measure, but also looking at those longer term effects of how it's going to change the staffing models, right? Of what we have in L&D, how we're going to be looking for those different talents. And I see, in the future creation of new L&D roles that we've not even heard of yet, which is interesting because I feel like it's been many years since L&D has had any type of innovation on that level where we would be creating brand new roles, across the industry.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Sean, same thing. I just want to get your thoughts on how you can foresee AI, helping to overcome challenges in measuring and improving outcomes, effectiveness, everything what we talked about.
I love this conversation, and I agree with everything that's been said. I think where we have to sometimes educate people is AI has been around for a long time, right? It's just now it's the speed and the access that we have. And so I love what we just heard, because I think where AI helps me is the speed at which we can do things now. And think of it like, if we don't just focus on the L&D use of AI, but we help people in our organizations use AI responsibly to free up their time, then you're like, oh, now you have more time to learn things, and we can, so it goes both ways, right? To help people do it. And, AI is kind of your co-pilot. I use it all the time, but it's, again, to what Ovi just said, you have to understand the input to get the right output. And you have to constantly, like, that's where the fun is changing the question. How do I ask this? And, there's so many things in learning right now you can get that's time sensitive and quicker for a manager. Like, I need to go and coach somebody real quick, and here's the situation. Give me a few pointers. Like, go to ChatGPT to help you with that. Don't wait for the coaching class to say, oh, I have to go to class first before I do it. Just ask a better question. And to what Abraham said, you have to be responsible though, right? We have to make sure you have the guardrails on. And my fear is when it's like, and I've heard this in my organizations that I've worked with, like, oh, you can't use it. We have to, protect IP, and you've got to go to legal, and now it has to go to IT. It's like, well, you're already using it, so let's just get over that piece of it. If you try to put the handcuffs on me inside of the business, I'm just gonna use my cell phone and do it myself. So we have to understand that's what we're doing. So give people more education on how to do it the right way. How do you, teach the relevancy, and how do you train the algorithms to get to know you and your language and the words? Like, that's the fun part. But we just have to help people get there responsibly. But I think more than anything, it just helps us get faster insights to things. And to also what Ovid said, when I at my previous company restructured the team, I didn't hire learning people. Like, I got that. I got the learning piece of it. I hired data people. I hired people that knew how to use technology. I hired people that wanted to play around with AI and that world. That was not for me. I just said, you do it and tell me what you're doing so I understand it. But I trust people to go out and do it. They are far smarter people at this than I am. By far. I'm just curious about it. I think it's fascinating. And to be able to type in and go like, man, I need to hire somebody and I haven't interviewed in a long time. Give me a couple interviewing things. You don't have to go to a class for that. Just teach me how to use it more responsibly. And then share what you've learned. Like, if somebody went there and said, hey, I just picked up a few tips on hiring or coaching, then maybe create a database so people can just go, here, I did it for you. Here's my thoughts. Here's what I learned. And you start to share things in a different way. But I think have fun with it and use it and be curious. Like, learning people need to put the learning hat back on and go back to learning and be curious and be passionate about things. It will change your outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Well said. I want to switch now to looking at a quick tech showcase where we have Bhupesh is going to walk us through a high level of assessify what that AI looks like in action, how it can be applied to some of the things we talked about. But like, we have enough time, but I do want to get one more question to Joanna in this section. I really want to hear your perspective. Like, what kind of data or results would a CFO want to see to feel confident in AI related learning investments?
Thank you. I was listening to what everyone was saying, and I'm going to say I agree with 80% of everything that was said. I think AI is very smart, but if you don't implement it the right way, meaning how does this complement the organization? How does it mitigate risks, not create risks? How does it align with the strategic view? How does it integrate in the current tools that we have? In this case, I'm going to just say Assessify, right? How would this eliminate some of the tools that we have or some of the investments that we are making every year? It could be very dangerous if you don't answer these questions. And the reason I said 80% is because I've seen situations where our sales team would upload the contract into ChatGPT in order to get feedback on what else should be included in a contract. This is not a safe way of using ChatGPT because it learns the information and then it takes that information and shares it with other companies, whoever is searching for the same thing, right? So it is a dangerous tool. AI that is not implemented the right guardrails, it's a dangerous tool. And an AI that is like you just take it because it's an open source, it's even more dangerous. So it has to be done with the IT department, with the right integration, in the systems that you have, with the right guardrails, and then with the right mindset on value creation. So what do I mean by that? Again, is it going to eliminate some of the investments that we have? Or like some of the cost? Is it going to maybe reduce the cost per learning in a long term? Is it going to simplify our footprint? Is it going to upskill our employees, and which employees and how? How do people learn? That's another question we never ask, right? But if you have a tool that can teach you and show you, these people are much more visual. I'm a visual person. I can learn visually. Other people are probably much more, they can listen better, right? Or some people are much better like applying immediately the information, versus other people are much better going to the theory first, right? Give me the theory. I remember me trying to ski. Give me the technique, and then I can do it. Or other people, I'd be like, no, I'm just going to try by myself. So having the right AI tool that also in L&D, right, that also helps you understand how to best create value creation for your employees through all these different lenses that I mentioned. It's very important. Not any AI tool.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's very insightful. Bhupesh, over to you. Real quick, if you want to show what this looks like in action, showing the Assessify tool.
Yeah, I think it's better that I show rather than I talk. Right, so can you see it? Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so Assessify we built, so the whole idea is like as an educator, I've been dreaming for all these years that can we really turn assessment into a learning tool? Because now the content-based learning has already hit the ceiling. The content is everywhere in LMS, in Coursera, edX, right? Everywhere in the classroom training, tons of the content is there. But now the content-led stuff is not, we are not able to really digest. We have enough food, but it's not going into our brain. We are not really training our biological neuron. And now the chat GPT is there. We are asking every question to the chat GPT, and digital neurons are building up. Our biological neurons are becoming slower and slower. So Assessify came out of this whole notion that can we really turn assessment into learning tool, whether it is a corporate, whether it is K-12, or whether it is academia, right? And we have done a lot of experimentation with corporate, right? Now we already discussed a lot of challenges. Just to really reiterate, right? We are assuming that the learning is happening because we are giving them the access to content. They are completing the courses, right? There is a poor ROI. It is extremely difficult to measure the ROI and effectiveness. It is difficult to really measure the learning outcome, or whatever the learning outcome we are measuring. It is actually measuring at a lower level cognitive capability, not higher cognitive capability. And measuring itself is a negative connotation, right? Which is like assessment, which does not really work in the corporate. We need to really shift focus from measuring to more on the improving, and how assessment can be used for improving, right? So let's take a step back. When we really ask a question, like for example, Sean, if I ask you the question, what is the impact of the L&D on the ROI, right? Or the growth of the organization, it triggers your billions of neurons in your head, right? And you try to really, it tries to establish the connection between multiple neurons, millions of neurons, and it tries to really extract the information from various pockets of the knowledge, and it's established the connection, right? So, and that's the reason studying is extremely difficult, whether it is university or whether it is a corporate, doesn't matter, right? And more you do, better the learning becomes, right? And that's the deeper impact assessment happens, right? And I think at the corporate we are nullifying this impact of the assessment, just brushing it off that it is just a negative connotation that measuring is not important. But if we don't measure, it is not only a post-mortem report, it actually aids into the learning, right? So assessment need to be used as a tool for not only measuring, but aid as a improvement, right? Now, what Assessify can really do, of course, like it can measure the learning impact, it can measure the ROI, it can measure the learning outcome and all this kind of stuff, and we will see slowly and gradually what it can really do. So this case study I already spoke about, that we did one major project with one of the leading fintech companies. We are able to really measure the learning outcome, learning effectiveness. We could really build up the IDP. We actually rolled out world first learning outcome measurement platform in New Delhi. Eddie was also here, so our Honorable Minister of Education actually launched it, right? So let's go back and let's see what kind of reports it can really generate, right? So this is very important report. It actually tells you that what kind of granular level it can really go, right? So let's example, this is a technical, you can use it for the leadership or you can use it for the sales or any other stuff, right? This is typically built on the Bloom's framework, right? And let's say you took 1,000 guys in your technical team and you conducted the Python training. And after 3 month training, you saw that, yes, this is the kind of report, right? So will you really continue this guy in your company, or will you really fire him, or maybe put into some other stuff like testing, but not in development, right? Certainly, this guy is good at knowledge, understanding, but he's absolutely poor at application of knowledge. His ability to analyze is poor. It means that if there is a bug in the code, he'll not be able to really analyze, right? And he'll not be able to really evaluate various softwares and can come to a conclusion and decide which programming language need to be used, right? Or he will not be able to really create a complex software, forget about debugging the code, right? So this actually not only gives the singular outcome, which I say curse of the singular outcome, which is A grade or B grade or 60% or 70% or 80%. So your employee can really get 90% in Coursera course on machine learning or maybe sales. But this score is absolutely useless score. It does not really tell you. It does not tell you what is the depth and breadth of the knowledge, right? It does not tell you whether he has gained the skill or whether it is based on the multiple choice question or what kind of cognitive capability he has built. To measure the higher cognitive capability, which is ability to analyze, ability to evaluate or create, you cannot measure it with multiple choice questions. Let's example in sales, right? In sales, if you really give him a task that, okay, create a go-to-market strategy to launch a CCFI in Kenya, you can't really assess with multiple choice questions. You need to really give him the like a case study, right? If you're trying to really hire somebody in HR and you give him a case that yes, there is some unwanted case has happened at the workplace, how you going to really handle, right? So you need to really hear their responses. Maybe you have conducted the leadership training, and a lot of corporate spend millions and millions of dollars on the leadership training, and we are working with a couple of them, right? So they learn the leadership theory, right? But they're not able to really apply, and you have to really ask them by through the say case studies. Then this is like a different dimension of the cognitive capability, which is going at a topic level, right? So you want to really find out whether your sales guys are poor at a sales fundamental or negotiation or product knowledge or lead generation or ability to use CRM or those kind of stuff, so that you pinpoint on those areas and reconduct those training or maybe give them some idea, right? So this actually tells you that one is the cognitive level, the other is actually topic wise or the focus area wise, right? Or let's example, in deep learning, you have the hundreds of algorithms, right? Let's example, if you're an e-commerce company, maybe you're using a recommender system, right? So you can really focus down on each specific area. Then this is important thing. This can really lead to building up a individual development plan. It gives the recommendation to L&D head or manager or supervisor or individual, right? At a different level on different topics, right? So this is dynamic, and that's where the AI comes into handy, right? So AI actually, based on the assessment tools you have given, it can really give the recommendation. What AI is also doing, it's also creating those case studies, and it's also evaluating those case studies, which we will see subsequently, right? So this is the kind of assessment schedule you can really plan, and the AI based on the course. Let's example, you have given access to 5,000 employees to Coursera or edX, and they have gone through the leadership or sales or some technical training or Power BI. Based on that course curriculum, it can really create the schedule of the assessment, which is every week or every 15 days or a month, which is a continuous assessment. The assessment is not only as a postmortem report, but the assessment is will feed into the learning, right? If you really put them pressure, right? But here is like a communication need to happen that we are not going to use this report to really fire you. This is going to really help you to digest that content, right? Which eventually you'll use in a longer term run. Now, this is the good example I want to really show you that how AI is evaluating. Let's see. So here, your employees are writing the code on the platform. The AI has evaluated, giving the personalized feedback, which is summative feedback. Uh, the AI is also giving the inline feedback, right? Which line they have done the wrong code. This is typically for graduate trainee engineers, where a lot of organizations hire graduates from colleges, or if you're trying to do the reskilling or upskilling of your existing employees, right? Uh, let's see, this is scenario-based question. This is what I was talking about. So scenario-based case studies can only check your higher cognitive capability, which is application of knowledge or evaluation or something judgmental, right? And that's where uh, this AI is doing the automatic evaluation. This is typically oral evaluation where we have done for our hundreds for this company, which I was talking about. So in multiple language here, you can really see this is like a Hindi, right? So the employee on the field, they're using their mobile phone. It can be used for insurance. So typically, they read the question and they record their responses on mobile phone, and the AI convert this text into uh, voice into the text, and then it does the analysis just like a human being and give the feedback, right? Now, so this this actually builds a very strong pillar in terms of really measuring and improving the learning outcome. Now we move next to the, like, for example, effectiveness, right? So let me walk you through the Kirkpatrick model implementation. So Assessify can simplify the Kirkpatrick model implementation very seamlessly. So once the training is conducted, based on the training, Assessify will automatically will generate the survey questions, right, relevant to those training programs, and you need not really throw the Google Forms or multiple forms. It automatically does. So the platform is measuring the learning outcome. It also sending the feedback forms, which is for reaction. This is the learning outcome you really get on the multiple competency level, right? And then you can send the survey forms to your supervisors, your employees for behavioral change, right? Or you can measure the implementation or application of a knowledge, right? And then finally, it can really create the composite score, right? Index, which is learning effectiveness index, right? And it can really, so you can create the learning effective index on the 5 scale or a 10 scale, right? It does a lot of mathematics under the hood, which is normalization, the score, giving the different weightages. You can really give the different weightages. Let's example, for basic survey level, you can really give 10% or 15%. You can really give for results or impact roughly around 35% or 40% or 50%, right? And then you can do the iterations. So this actually, and you can really not only use for the technology, you can use for the sales or leadership or any other thing, right? And this can really work with your LMS or Coursera, or whether it's classroom training or any other stuff. So that's very brief, and then I think I can really stop over here.
Thank you. Yeah, that I hope that gives everyone sort of a sense of, what we're working on with Assessify. And if anyone listening to this has any questions or wants to explore that further, you can feel free to reach out to myself or Bhupesh on LinkedIn. Now we have 5 minutes left. I want to get sort of a wrap up, final reflections from all the panelists here. So, whether it's reflections on the discussion, predictions about the future of learning with AI, advice for organizations, or anything else you feel is important to share with the audience. I will start with you, Sean. What are your thoughts? What do you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, thank you so much again for the invitation. I enjoy these kind of conversations, and I learn something myself. So I always come into these not as a panelist, but also as a learner. And I think from everybody on this panel, I have gotten some knowledge myself just to either rethink, reshape, remember on how I can become a better learning person. And I think that's what I would lead people with is don't don't do nothing with this conversation. Do something with this conversation. Whatever that spark is, send a note, research whatever you want, reach out and learn more. But that's how, be a continual learner. Just leave it at that. But thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Ovid, over to you. Same thing. Open floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was something that I shared kind of when we had our panelist discussion earlier, which is, AI won't necessarily replace your job, but somebody that knows how to use AI will. And, want to put it out there, not as a threat, but as kind of a call to action, right? For all of us to, learn how to integrate it within our daily jobs and our tasks and the thing that we have to get done. And find out where it can give you a lift, but embrace it because it's not going to go away anytime soon.
Great. Thank you. Abraham, over to you. Same thing.
Well, I think that this is a big call for all of the L&D professionals to, first of all, keep in mind that we are a service function and that we need to engage with business and other service functions as finance, and that AI is not only the future, but it's our reality. It's as easy as getting our personal phone and we are there. So it will require a level up for all of us in creating new skills, changing the way we approach to creative content and the way we use tech in the environment that we work. So it's a major call for all of us to keep improving our skills and yeah, we can use AI, but that again, we are dedicated and we provide service to people. So should always put that first.
Great. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Joanna, over to you.
So first, I want to say that I'm really impressed by the tool. And as a CFO, I would be like, okay, let's try it. So maybe in a later discussion, I would like to hear more about, the opportunity to take the tool and do a test within a department and then see the results and have the L&D team measure, the results of having a Sysify versus not having it. Because watching the demo, it kind of made me interested in the topic of how do we go about, proving that we need this, but also how do we try it in a way that the organization, sees, the results separate and then expand it to the rest of the organization. So that's the first thought. And the second thought is regarding people don't know how to ask finance and the president of the division or the president of the company or the board for money in order to invest in a tool or in an idea or in anything that they believe in. So I just want to leave everyone with this thought that it's actually not hard to get money. You just have to prove that, what you're trying to do first in a test environment, can really be expandable later on to the company, and you can measure the results. And then once you measure the results of the test, you are able to defend that investment large scale with either KPIs or the other thing that I keep insisting on, not only ROI, but also risk mitigation. Just think of a parachute that is on the plane. Nobody ever puts like, what is the ROI of a parachute till you actually need it? And then you say, the ROI is going to be the fact that, we protect people's lives, brand protection, mission of the company, so it's the same thing with L&D. People look at it just as a cost, but it's actually the conversation should be shifting to risk mitigation and value creation, and you truly understand the value of L&D in those moments of need, the same thing as a parachute.
Well said. Thank you for that. That brings us right on time to close this out. I want to give a huge thank you to all the esteemed panelists here. Really insightful discussion, really wonderful to have all of you here. I want to thank the attendees for also joining. And, we hope to continue these conversations. So feel free to reach out to us anytime. And thank you again to everyone.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you.
thank you, Sean. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Rich.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.